If bad actors have spent years mining our data, maybe hiding it in the dark web or wherever they hide it, is it too late to think about data security?
It just so happens that asymmetry has become that much more parabolic. That's naturally sort of tilted the favor in the attackers' realm, but that doesn't mean it's too late.
Well, the race is never finished. The most valuable data is the most recent data. If you start today by protecting your data, that's going to serve you well in the future.
All right, everyone, welcome to the third episode of The Short and the Long, the most fun podcast on Wall Street. Today, we're going to do something especially fun, which is to tackle a topic that comes up around every dinner table and around every client conversation. And that is this question of, is my data secure? And what do I need to do in order to create that security? Is it too late? So joining me today to talk about this are two amazingly smart, super cool women who are experts on the topic. My colleague, Fatima Boolani, who is co-head of software research here at Citi and also an expert in cyber software. And then Anneka Gupta, who joins us from Rubrik. She's the chief product officer and an expert in the space as well. So ladies, welcome.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
I want to ask this question, though, around the increase or kind of the spike in terms of breaches. I mean, do you guys have any good stats around that? How do we think about how many more breaches or how many more attacks there are today than there were, say, just 2 or 3 years ago?
On all measures, essentially, cyber attacks have gone up. So if you look at the amount of dollars paid in ransoms, which is hard to track because people don't publicly report this information.
And do they pay it in digital assets?
Yeah, they pay it in Bitcoin. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the most common way. So that's been going up massively year on year since 2018. And then more recently, if you look at the speed of attacks, which I think is the most interesting, where you used to have a phenomenon where an attacker would break into a system and then they would just sit there and kind of explore, and they might be there for days, weeks, months.
Lurkers.
Reconnaissance.
Right. Doing reconnaissance, trying to find the best time to do the attack, like during a holiday or some other kind of very disruptive event. They will sit and dwell in your systems for weeks, if not months. Now what we're seeing is that the speed of attacks is getting down to seconds. So you're going from like 27 days to 27 seconds. This is partially because of AI. When you layer that on top, now you're going to see that all these stats that we've seen around growth in attacks and ransoms is going to go through the roof in the next couple of years.
Jumping back to this idea of traffic, more network activity, if I'm trying to book a vacation, I'm going to go on Claude. I'm going to go on ChatGPT and say, here are my parameters. And the agent, the agentic commerce layer of all of that is going to be pinging 100 different sites for my hotel, for my flights. I have littles. I need car seats. I need accommodations and transfers. If we thought we were hyper-connected on the internet as organizations post the cloud era, it's about to go to an 11, right? As we get to the other side of the post-AI age.
But I want to understand, what are the most kind of common ways that personal data and accounts are exploited right now?
Hackers are logging in, they're not breaking in, and that humans are the most fallible. So we're the ones where our passwords are getting compromised. We're clicking on the links even after we've had all of this training not to click on any links. And attackers are coming in that way. And that is the most common entry point now for attackers. And that's going to constantly be the case no matter how many improvements we make with AI and other technologies.
I want to repeat something you said, which I think is super important, is that these are not people who are breaking down doors. They are unlocking the doors with our own passwords.
Yeah.
You could have had your doors locked, your windows locked, put your data and your jewels in a safe. But if you open the door and let someone in who's, wearing a trench coat and a hat because they look like they're someone familiar, i.e., legitimate credentials being used to infiltrate and access systems, right? So as an organization, and the advice is you have to understand what your systems are, what the behavioral attributes of those systems are, and what the user's behavior against those systems are. So in the event login credentials are abused and are very legitimately accessing systems, you're able to detect and very quickly prevent what looks and smells and feels like suspicious behavior because it's an anomalous activity or an aberration relative to a baseline normal. And that's where I think organizations need to get smarter, and AI would help there, right?
Yeah, and it's just so prevalent right now. And AI is making their profiles look super realistic. And it's a real problem, especially organizations that are all remote are having to deal with this and figure out how do you suss out the real people from the non-real people. And now they're asking people to come into an office to verify their identity, lots of things like that. But it's kind of everywhere.
25 years ago, close to 30 years ago maybe, I was working at a firm where security in the buildings was not as strict as it was, kind of post 9/11. And there were a number of people that sort of posed as employees of the consulting firm. They looked the part, they were dressed in the suit. They suggested that they were coming in from an outside office, from the London office or the Frankfurt office. And there was kind of no way to verify. And people swiped them in. Turned out to be a massive theft. But what I hear both of you say is we can't be afraid to question as individuals and as businesses. And that actually it's on every employee to actually be doing that on a daily basis. So if you had this one piece of advice to give to an individual, not to a business, but to an individual about securing their data right now, what would it be?
This may be very simple, but set secure passwords. That is the one thing that individuals can do that is going to protect your own data. They just need to be long. So they don't need to have like all this complexity. If they're just long, like a random sentence that you make up, that is the best protection.
You want to make sure that the folks that you do business with, i.e. in your supply chain, you want to make sure you're reading the ingredients list on their products so that you're not, introducing unorganic, gluten-filled products, i.e. bad stuff into your environment. So that relationship with your suppliers becomes that much more paramount in a world where, the data becomes the critical asset to exploit. So it's, you can protect your environment as much as you can, but, when you let loose into nature, you kind of have to make sure you have your eyes and ears peeled on, how the others are conducting themselves so you can react appropriately.
Actually, Anneka, let's stay on this topic of zero trust, because zero trust has become like a bit of a buzzword. For people who are not investors in the space, they may not know exactly what that means. Kind of break it down for all of our listeners who may not be familiar with this term. What does that mean?
Zero trust essentially means that you give people within your organization the least access possible to the crown jewels. So you assume that every single credential, every single user is going to be breached at some point, and you figure out how do you lock down access to your data, access to your systems in such a way that if that person is compromised, nothing bad happens. It's a great practice. It's what everyone aspires to do. It's also really hard because we all need access to our systems and data in order to do our jobs every day.
Never trust, always verify. I don't care who you are. We're going to constantly make sure we're putting the credentials, your access, your experience through the ringer, right? Zero trust isn't a product. It's a framework. It's an architecture, but that's also what makes it hard. There is no silver bullet. So as it relates to resiliency, translating that into what we've seen where zero trust principles and practices are not in motion, you get ransomware attacks. So you get bad actors who bring your IT system down to its knees, and then you have to pay in Bitcoin to get the stuff back up online. And meanwhile, when your business is offline, you have no idea what the bad actors are cooking up, maiming, mutilating, mangling your data, unbeknownst to you. You've got bad actors now, again, deploying AI-based techniques to propagate ransomware to bring businesses down, right? Because that's how they get paid.
You know that someone is going to get that key and be able to get into your house. So you have to assume breach. You have to assume that someone is going to get in. And how are you as an organization going to bounce back from that and be resilient and make sure that it doesn't take down your business, doesn't disrupt revenue, higher walls, deeper moats? And the reality is even as the spend is going up, the number of breaches is going up, the severity of these breaches is going up, and that's just not enough anymore. If you think about natural disasters like fires, or I'm in California, so earthquakes are a real thing. What do you do in school? You practice, you have fire drills, you have earthquake drills. That's what organizations need to do too. They need to practice resilience, because if the only time you've ever had to bring back your organization is when it's been hit with a ransomware attack, you have no practice and you have no ability to do that quickly. And over time, more and more to try out different scenarios, learn from that and get better so that when that bad day hits, they're able to recover quickly.
There's so many ways that we could take this conversation. But one of the things we've all been really focused on is kind of building AI agents or employing AI agents on our team to scale, to create efficiency, to create speed. But then you kind of have to ask yourselves, how do we think about visibility and monitoring of these AI agents? Everyone wants them, but can we trust them?
Imagine the voluminous amount of agents that are non-humans that can propagate, spin up, spin down. They can be hijacked much more quickly. They can be weaponized much more quickly without a trace. Agents are working 24/7. We're not paying them bonuses. So, that creates sort of this whole new nexus of risk and attack surface expansions, because you can't sit here and play whack-a-mole.
I mean, if we think about cybersecurity even before AI, humans have not been able to keep up at all. The number of alerts, the number of things you have to investigate, the amount of time it takes, humans just can't keep up as it is. Now you throw in AI agents, which are inserting 100x the amount of productivity with 100x the amount of risk. And now what are you going to do? And the only way to actually solve this problem is to fight AI with AI. Maybe truly, like with AI, the defenders can have one leg up over the attackers.
Does outsourcing to an agent create a false sense of security? Yes?
Yes. I mean, agents are unpredictable. That's the beauty of them, and that they can adapt to any situation. But it's also the risk that they are super unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do. All of us have had experiences where we are talking to AI and it hallucinates about something. So what happens when it hallucinates about something that's super important to your business?
Or AI that tries to make me feel better about myself. I've had to have some pretty tough conversations with a couple of these LLMs. Like, hey, I know I'm not right here. Please please tone down the compliments. I know you want me to continue to engage, but, give me a break. I know I'm not that good.
Where I'd maybe peel away and defer from Anneka is a good agent is one that's well trained like a puppy, right? You give it enough time and you can really tighten the scope of behavior, and then you really do get the most productive outputs from that agent. But that requires more of that human in the loop type
and
dynamic.
More upfront work is what I hear you say, as someone who's trained lots of puppies and lots of training. So there has been very kind of mixed performance of cybersecurity names over the course of this year. I mean, Fatima, I want to ask you this one first. Is the market mispricing, cyber and data security risk?
Markets do what they do best is the pendulum swings in extremes, right? So I would tell you in the first part of the year when a lot of the cybersecurity complex was underperforming on the back of the frontier AI labs, talking a very, very compelling game around, the consequential changes they're going to bring to the marketplace with respect to cybersecurity hygiene. I mean, the entire group was underperforming, right? Because it was a shot across the bow. It's okay, the labs are going to eat the lunch and then some for the cyber businesses. And cybersecurity businesses are very lucrative businesses because if you think about them conceptually, they're an insurance policy for risk and compliance and protection.
But what I heard you just say right now is that spend hasn't stepped up in 2026 the way you would think it needs to.
That's exactly right. And I want to make an important point here. When we had our last computing paradigm shift, so when we went from the client-server era where everything was castle and moat, we were all protected from the internet, we went from, on average, in the client-server era, spending 4 cents of every dollar of IT on cybersecurity to 8 cents for every dollar on IT as most organizations sort of leapt forward into the cloud era. If history were to rhyme, I'd suspect that 8 goes to 16 cents, 20 cents, maybe 25 cents for every piece of IT dollar that you're going to spend henceforth, because AI systems are so inherently more complex, more novel, fast-moving, right? Especially with agentic involvement. Budgets are going to have to catch up.
Now, in order to use AI to fight AI, you actually need holistic context, which means that there's going to be a collapse in these point solutions, and there's going to be a rise and a focus more from a budgetary perspective.
So if we go from 8% to, say, optimistically 20 to 25% of a tech budget, what space is going to be the direct and best beneficiary right away?
The bigs are going to get bigger.
The bigs are going to get bigger.
there is going to be this mega cap internet moment. I think we're sort of starting to see it unfold in that any technology that's viable, that's worth having, that has developed a really interesting product market fit, it's going to get gobbled up by the bigs. And, drawing the analogy and tightening it up with internet, it's Google, Meta, Amazon, or bust. Right? It's those companies were very prescient and they found assets in the market that could have been disruptive to them, 5 years down the road. And those companies were very astute in sort of hoovering those incipient assets up before they became a big deal.
Yeah.
We maybe saw that in cyber a little bit with Wiz, which is now part of Google. So Google saw that coming, right? And how important that is. But our view is that we're going to continue to see bigs getting bigger, which then kind of has its own level of risk for an organization, because do you get systemic risk with concentration of spend and technology risk with a supplier? I think that's a very debate-worthy point, but right now, I think that's where we're trending.
What question do analysts and investors not ask you that they should be asking?
I think there's a lot of AI doomsday philosophy that people have right now, and viewpoints that AI is going to make every business obsolete. I think the key question to ask is how is AI going to actually accelerate your business?
Yeah.
Because many businesses are actually going to be accelerated by AI. Not all, but many are. And that's the question that's not being asked.
Okay. This is going to be an either or, rapid response question. Fatima, what scares you more right now? AI supercharging attacks or enterprises blindly pushing data into AI systems without understanding the risks?
Oh, latter, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Because status quo, we weren't really doing a good job of that. Gives me the heebie-jeebies the most.
That enterprises are blindly putting their data into these AI systems. Anneka, is that your same view? Is it that AI is supercharging the attacks, or that people are not thinking about the implications of where their data is?
I actually think that they are thinking about the implications, but they can't help it. So I talk to a lot of heads of security that basically say, I can't say no. I can't say no to my organization because there's such an imperative to show AI adoption, to show productivity gains, that even though I know there's a huge amount of risk that we're taking on and that I might get fired because this risk may manifest, I still have no ability to say no.
You guys, this has been a fascinating, super fun conversation. As I said at the beginning, the chance to speak to two super smart women on one of the topics that is most top of mind for our clients and for our colleagues has been awesome. So Fatima, Anneka, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks to all my colleagues in the room.
What a fantastic discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
So much to unpack.
Yeah, so JP, you and I have talked about a lot throughout the course of 2026, and I brought this up obviously in that conversation with Fatima and Anneka about building resilience in portfolios and the importance of resilience for companies. This feels like a natural continuation of this theme: energy security, supply chain security, data security. I mean, what was your takeaway?
Completely agree. I think all the shocks we've seen over the past, 6 years, all point in the same direction. Companies need to tighten up their security, whether it's on the supply chain or it's on the critical mineral side. Now it's on the data side. I think it's very clear that your data needs to be extremely secure in this environment. And thinking about how things are going to change in a new world of agentic AI is paramount.
Yeah, we've also talked a lot about whoever owns the data wins. Those are the winners. If you have this big pool of data, you're going to be able to exploit it. You're going to be able to use large language models and other kind of AI tools, in a way that a company that only has a small percentage of data won't be able to do.
You have less worries, right? As a chief information security officer, I think that's a really important point, right? And the big may get bigger as they look for M&A opportunities to avoid being disrupted, right? Which we saw in the large cap internet names, which you're very familiar with. But
yes.
I think it's a very interesting theme for us to pursue on the heels of defense, security, resilience also in portfolios.
I mean, I think the last and final thing I would say is I'm going to be watching very closely for announcements from all types of companies that have technology spend budgets, about how much they're allocating to cyber and security and to data going forward. If Fatima's right, and we could potentially double or triple the percentage of the technology spend that goes into cyber and data, this could be a really interesting investment opportunity.
Totally agree.
All right.
All right.
Let's head back upstairs.
Let's do it.